Good evening. I would like to introduce Honorary Mayor Sadie Green.
We would like to welcome you to our October 1st, 2019 meeting of the Coeur d'Alene City Council and call the meeting to order. Renata, will you do the roll call, please?
Certainly. Miller?
Here.
English?
Here.
Evans?
Here.
Ettinger?
Here.
McEvers?
Here.
Kukin?
Yes.
Thank you, Renata. Pastor Jeff Smith with Northwest Family Church will give our invocation. Please rise.
Father, we are thankful for those who serve us in the government, Lord. And Lord, we're thankful for our honorary mayor tonight serving. And Lord, we thank you for Sadie and her heart for government, Lord, and all that you're putting in her for the future. And Lord, leadership is difficult. And yet these people stand and say, hey, we want to help. We want to make a difference. And we're thankful for our mayor and those who serve in this council, for the great city we live in and this beautiful area of the country that we are so blessed to be a part of. Lord, I just pray tonight as we gather together that this would be a great time of covering business for the city, and that your peace would be over this whole organization and its business. And thank you, Lord, for what you're going to do. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Please remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. Woody, please lead us into the pledge.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. So I just wanted to thank Sadie. It's definitely an improvement. But it only lasted 3 minutes, but it was definitely an improvement. But anyway, thank you very much, Sadie, and we're expecting big things from you in the future. All right, thank you very much. Okay, Renata, we did have an amendment to the agenda tonight, but that was posted.
Was posted timely, so no motion needed.
Okay, so no motion needed. So we did add an executive session at the end of our agenda here tonight. So we will move on to presentation. So our first presentation is the Idaho Washington Aquifer Collaborative Efficiency Irrigation and Landscape Design Guidelines. Terry Pickle, an assistant, is here tonight.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Usually I'm standing up here asking you for something, but tonight I'm just offering a little education. I have a co-presenter here. This is Jay Adams. He is General Manager of Liberty Lake Sewer and Water District, and he'll kind of go over the nuts and bolts of our presentation tonight, and he's kind of our resident expert on irrigation efficiency. So, the Idaho Washington Aquifer Collaborative was formed in 2013, kind of out of the need and the cooperation of about 19 area public water system and wastewater systems. We kind of looked at the bi-state aquifer study that was done in around 2012 and thought it would be a good idea to get together and kind of work jointly across the borders to to help protect water quality and water quantity. So, like I said, there's about 19 members. We're here today to talk to you about our newest project, and that's the Model Efficient Irrigation and Landscape Design Guidelines. It's something we've put together kind of as an aid to public water systems to help with standards for more efficient irrigation systems. We also do water quality projects. We've done some videos for public TV that have for stormwater and water quality preservation, and we do have a 2-minute video that's available online for irrigation systems, and we have a 10-minute video online for Washington and Idaho wastewater systems. So, as I've been up here and talked to you before, I've talked about the inefficiencies of irrigation systems. About 70% of irrigation water goes down the drain, needlessly. Sometimes we'll hit between 50 and 75% peak demands solely for irrigation. So how does that affect your bottom line? For the cities, in the utilities, we're building extra infrastructure. Some of those wells can cost up to $1.5 million a piece, and 2/3 of them sit idle for 7 months of the year. That's a great expense that maybe we could do something to cut that back a little bit. Also, the customers, they're wasting water. They're paying for water needlessly that could be conserved and watered wisely on their irrigation systems and save them some dollars in the end too. So typically, in the winter, you'll see water usage way down here, and then in the spring and the summer, you'll get this bell curve where water grows, or water usage increases over the summer for irrigation primarily. But as Jay will point out, people don't water on a bell curve like this. If you could water like this, we could conserve quite a bit of water. But what you do is you run your irrigation system in the summer at your highest demand, turn it off at the end of the season. Well, next spring, you turn it on at that setting, so you kind of water in a box. You really don't water on a bell curve. So in the spring and the falls, if you could adjust that water usage, that's where you could achieve the most conservation. So that water's not needed that much. How often do we see this? I know we see it in this city, and you can probably see it in any city in the U.S. How often do we receive public complaints about it? Almost daily in the summertime. What issues can it cause? Stormwater pollution. All that stuff that's on the streets being washed into the storm drain. And property damage. Streets are going to fall apart, curbs can be damaged, sidewalks. So our motto is, remember, only rain down the drain. That, IJ will take over with it.
Council? So the most important aspect with landscape and irrigation design standards is there's no industry or national standard for these. So think about building codes. For building codes, you have electrical standards, you have plumbing standards, but there are no standards for irrigation systems. So most of these irrigation systems are installed by seasonal staff of landscape companies and things like that, so there's no design criteria. And one way to determine how efficient an irrigation system is this concept of distribution uniformity. Distribution uniformity is really a percentage on how efficient your landscape irrigation system is. So the yellow highlighted box, for instance, illustrates a landscape with distribution uniformity of about 50%. And if you wanted to get 1 inch of water on your landscape and your system is only 50% efficient, you're going to have to put 2 inches of water on your landscape to keep that lawn green. So most systems are achievable at 75% distribution uniformity, but the most common that we see is around 50%. And this is illustrated in the following slides. These are Google Earth images from August of 2011. And this is kind of moving across the Rathdrum Prairie from, Spokane Valley Rathdrum Prairie from, this picture here is from Betty Kiefer Elementary School in Rathdrum, and you can see the green donuts. And the importance of this is that people water to the dry spots. So when they see dry spots, they go to the irrigation timer, crank up the time, and irregardless of how much you increase that time, if your system is not designed properly, those dry spots never go away. And so you're just increasing your time and you're not really improving the landscape. Here's one, Woodland Middle School in Coeur d'Alene. You can see a lot of the green donuts here, but some parts of the land, and it's not restricted to size. Even the smaller portions of the landscape around here also have distribution issues as well. So it's not limited to like large park areas. You can see it in the adjacent properties for single family residential as well. But it's much more observant on a larger scale. Highlands Golf Course in Post Falls. There's some interesting features here that are not just green donuts. If you see some of the, oblong shapes, like right in here and over in here, these could be inefficiencies with maintenance. So you might have plugged heads or heads that aren't rotating. Liberty Lake Elementary School in Liberty Lake. Very observant green donuts there. Irrigation systems are supposed to be designed to spray head to head. It's clear that these heads are not spraying head to head, thereby leaving those green donuts and lots of brown spots. Valley Christian School, Spokane Valley, you can see, it's kind of observed in this slide, that it was recently even watered by evidence of the wet areas in the baseball diamond. And certain parts of this system have great distribution uniformity where you don't see dry spots. Whitman Elementary School in Spokane. You can see the green donuts, you can see areas of good distribution uniformity, and then some areas of complete dead grass. So that might be a maintenance issue. It's hard to say what's going on with this property, but lots of things that are going on with this property, that's evident. So we've seen these traditional spray heads in the photo on the top. Those traditional spray heads spray anywhere from 0.1 to almost 6 gallons per minute. A lot of manufacturers, all the main manufacturers, Hunter, Toro, Rainbird, are all developing this MP rotator, and MP stands for matched precipitation. And these rotor heads are quick little retrofits. You just screw one off, you screw that back on, and they have a much lower flow rate from a 0.17 to 1. So what does that mean? That means with this low flow rate, there's less pressure loss across the system, and so you don't need as many heads, you don't need as many pipes. And so the photo on the right-hand side shows how you can achieve a better design with less infrastructure. This is important to the homeowner as well as important to the contractor installing it and the amount of money that they save. And then obviously it's important to the provider. So here's some real-life examples. We did some pilot projects in Liberty Lake Sewer and Water District on our property, and please take note that this property is also the same time frame, 8 of 2011. We have 2.5 acres. I audited this system in 2005. Distribution uniformity was 44%. We implemented some landscape measures such as pressure regulation, matched our rotor heads, and installed some sensor-based technology. This cost us a little under $500. We reduced our water by 36% the following year, and I improved DU to 61% for less than $500. And you can see this landscape is absent of green donuts. Here's another example we did on our site in 2005. That little swale area illustrated in the red polygon. We retrofitted 22 spray heads. Those spray heads that were in place were kicking out 2.66 gallons per minute. We put MP rotators in, reduced that flow to 0.71 gallons per minute per head. So every minute this system runs, we save 42.9 gallons a minute. Here's another one. We did a swale along the roadside. This is important for cities in particular to have to manage roadsides. There were 61 spray heads. These MP rotators have a better spray distance, and so we were able to eliminate 27 heads total. So thereby we retrofitted 34. Those spray heads that we retrofitted were 1.85 gallons per minute. We reduced them to 0.5 gallon per minute, and the recognized savings was 95.85 gallons per minute every minute that system runs. And you can see this is after, we had very good distribution uniformity. So I think this is Terry's slide. Yep.
Thank you, Bajay. So we wanted to point out what we could do on a very small margin just to save water. So we thought if we could just, save 50 or get our distribution uniformity up to between 40 and 70%. The blue curve kind of shows typical usage. If we could save that 30 to 40%, we could drop that in almost a third, maybe even a half. We also wanted to point out even simple adjustments and some relatively inexpensive head replacements can be achieved. They can have a significant effect on your irrigation performance. Even just pressure regulation, as Bajay pointed out. The upgrades do not have to cost a fortune for your typical system, and the new installations can be even less. They can be relatively quick and easy. So what are our goals? We were kind of looking to provide local jurisdictions and agencies with an understanding of the importance of designing and installing and maintaining efficient landscapes and irrigation systems. We're hoping that some of the utilities will take some of what we've put together and enact an efficient irrigation landscape requirements. There are none currently in a lot of the cities in the area, and this will help address the efficiencies and design standards. And this guide is kind of a recommended tool we've put together. Our consultant went out and looked at other states that have done this already, California, Arizona, Utah, Nevada, Florida. At one time, they all had abundant water. Now they're all fighting over it. We don't want to get there. We do have a great source in the aquifer. Our water rates are fairly cheap, but We don't want to, end up like those states. So a long yard checklist, efficient irrigation upgrades, proper installation and maintenance is crucial. Seasonal adjustments, as I talked about, don't water in a box. And consider native and drought-tolerant plants. They can be very beautiful. We didn't get some slides that we were hoping from Spokane early enough for this presentation, but they are in our future presentations, and they show some very gorgeous landscapes that are almost xeriscape. So, as I mentioned, our goals: reduce regional summer irrigation peak usage. We want to enhance regional efficiency standards, protect the water quality and quantity, and this guide will provide a menu of implementation options for which municipalities and water systems can choose. As elected and appointed officials, how could you utilize this type of system? Please join me in thanking IWAC. We were hoping some of the other members would be here tonight, but they couldn't make it. And we wanted to thank you for your very valuable time and listening to us.
Questions for Terry? Terry, I think this is great stuff, and I think that we all sometimes look at our lawns and think, gosh, we're probably putting too much water on this lawn, right?
Yep.
A challenge that I think that our citizens have is really getting vendors out. I mean, we have a hard enough time just getting someone out to turn your sprinkler on, right? So I'm wondering what we can do to, I think that for the backflow, isn't there a list of vendors or how do
Yes.
people find vendors? I'm wondering if we could accumulate a list of vendors that could help our citizens make their home sprinkler systems more efficient, because that's a challenge. It really is hard to find someone to turn on your sprinkler or even fix a sprinkler.
And that's the challenge for us too, is there aren't a lot of certified individuals that are available to do that. That's one of the things we're kind of looking at, is trying to get some promotion in industry for standards and guidelines for the designers and installers.
Yeah.
Really, there isn't a lot out there yet. The irrigation assemblies, the heads are coming online with, more and more suppliers, but it's getting those people out there to recognize that, do a proper design and installation.
So if there's any way that we could accumulate a list of vendors that could help our citizens
we could
out and
look at that,
get
yes.
that information out
Yes.
to them, I think that would
Yeah.
be great. Because I think we all, too, are walking or driving down the street and we see people sprinkling the street. Right, they're not sprinkling their lawn, they're sprinkling the
I
streets.
call it trying to grow asphalt, so.
Yeah, yeah,
Tim would like that, so.
yeah. All right, thank you, Terry, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we will move on to public comment. Now is a public comment portion. If anyone wishes to address the council on city business, they shall have 3 minutes to do so. If anyone would like to approach for public comment. Okay, not seeing anyone tonight. We will move on to announcements. Any member of the council have an announcement tonight? Amy?
I would like to remind the community that our leaf removal program will begin on November 12th, and we encourage everyone to keep your leaves and needles on your own property until November 1st. So the city will start picking up leaves again on November 12th, and they'll start in the southern area of town and move their way north.
And Amy, too, we have Mayor's Awards in the Arts.
Yep, and that is coming up on
A week from tomorrow.
tomorrow. Is that October 10th?
Or the 9th.
9th,
Octo-
October 9th.
October 9th,
Yep.
6 o'clock at the Hagedon Event Center. The
Thank you.
Mayor's Awards in the Arts, yeah. So, any other member of the council have an announcement tonight? Okay, we'll move on to the consent calendar. Woody?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move for approval of consent calendar as presented, including Resolution 19044.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Roll call, please, Renata.
English,
Yes?
Eddinger,
Yep.
Evans,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
McEvers,
Yes.
Kukin.
Motion carried. Move on to other business. We have resolution number 19045, approval of change order number 2 to the agreement with Apollo Inc. for construction of the wastewater tertiary treatment Phase 2 improvements. Mike Anderson. Welcome, Mike.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So I bring to you tonight change order number 2, as you mentioned, for our contract with Apollo. This is the final change order that summarizes all the various changes that have occurred throughout the process, throughout the construction So there were a total of 100 or so smaller changes that you've been provided, a large paper list or a large electronic list of them that range from negative costs to zero cost, up to tens of thousands of dollars and everywhere in between. So I would like the opportunity to go over those with you tonight in extreme detail.
And you are kidding, correct?
Yes, don't worry, everyone. So firstly, to give you a broad overview, I wanted to show you in these two slides what it is that we did. So in this picture on the left, you can see all fronting the road that enters the college. This is our primary clarifier. We added a third primary clarifier. Those are the covered clarifiers that add, you probably wouldn't even know it, what they're doing, and that was the point of them, to kind of blend in a little bit and also control odor issues was twofold reason for covering those. Not for nothing, but we also had to change some of the pipework around and everything to incorporate all that. On the picture on the right, you can see both this clarifier, which is this circular tank. That's a secondary clarifier. And at that point, there's not much odors emanating from that part of the process. We already have biological treatment there, so we don't have very many odors. That was part of this upgrade, and the final major project that we did was build out this building over here. This is our third stage of treatment, the tertiary membrane filtration system that you hear so much about. So if you'll recall, we were running just about 25% of the plant's flow through that for the last, for about 2 years or so, just to verify that this process was going to work. And now we've built it up to 5 million gallons. We have the capability of building it up to 6 million gallons. That was not part of this upgrade, but we've built it out to 5 million gallons to handle all of our flow. So every little drop of flow, I'm glad we had that nice precursor about the importance of water. Every drop of our wastewater flows through here, and I'll show you a slide at the end that shows just what a wonderful job this whole process has been as far as the way it's working. But before we get to that, let's go into I wanted to give you a brief overview. I did want to not just glance over what it is that we were encompass some of these change orders. So a large portion of this project involved underground work. In fact, Apollo, the contractor who has done many of these types of projects, said that this was the most challenging yard piping, the term that we use, project that they've ever encountered. So, and as you're aware, this plant started in 1938, and we've been adding on to it. This is phase 5C2. So you get an idea of the different phases and how this thing has grown. So when you do something like that and you want to put in, if you look at this photo in the middle here, this is a pipe that feeds that secondary clarifier. So we're putting through about 1.5 million gallons of water a day through this pipe. So it's a rather large pipe, and to snake it around all these other pipes was a bit of a challenge. There were some pipes that we didn't know were there. When we did discover them, they were perhaps corroded or needed to be rerouted. There was a lot of unknowns when we went into the ground. And surprisingly, it wasn't as bad as could have been. But we did take the opportunity to, while we're in there, let's mark them, So we know exactly, we surveyed every pipe that we exposed. So we know exactly where that pipe lies. So for future use, we can, if we have to add in secondary clarifier number 4, 30 years from now, we'll know exactly where these pipes are from when we put that pipe right on top of this one or wherever it goes. So that was a major portion or a large chunk of change that went towards one of these 100 different changes that had to occur. Some of the other ones that occurred were pipework corrosion. We've discovered during our first initial, the 1 million gallons a day that we were flowing through for the last couple of years, we discovered that there was some corrosion going on that really needed to be mitigated. So, for example, one of the things we had to do, if you look at this pump on the right, these pumps needed to be replaced anyways, they were too small. So when we ordered the new ones, we just ordered new ones, bigger ones. When we pulled this apart, we realized just what was going on, and we thought, well, it doesn't make much sense. This is one of those things where it's, why would we just put this larger pump in place when after just a couple of years we see the type of corrosion that went on here? So what we did was we lined those pumps with the type of polymer, or some of them had glass lining, or that sort of thing that would help prevent some of that corrosion, as an example. So those were a couple of the major items that happened, that occurred throughout this process. Some of the other items that had occurred were, there was some changes to asphalt, for example, where we said, okay, we originally spec'd out this amount of asphalt. What we really need is we've got this ice skating rink in the back where all the water just pools every winter. So what we need to do is we're going to trade. We don't need asphalt here. We can put rock over here or whatever it is around this clarifier or something like that, and we'll trade you. Let's get some asphalt in the back where we could really use it. And we were able to incorporate that into an overall asphalt of the project. So just to, and feel free to ask me any questions so I don't drone on here too much. I wanted to refresh you on where we came from and where we are now. So the original contract was signed in February of 2017 at a cost of $16.169 million. Change order number 1, if you recall, was the overhead gantry crane. That's the crane that's used to remove those membranes. We certainly saw the importance of that, and council agreed, and we decided to go ahead and install this crane that will assist us with that, just for dollar amounts. Those are, we have 5 trains that are lined with these membranes, and it's about $1 million per train to replace those membranes. So obviously, big dollar amounts that we're talking about here, but these are important to maintain our water quality that was just so eloquently discussed earlier. So that was change order number 1, and change order number 2 now is the last and final change order that will complete this project, and as I mentioned, it encompasses all the different changes that were unanticipated but necessary for completion. So also I'd like to take the opportunity to discuss what does that mean? How are these, what decision-making process went into these 100 different changes? So in many cases, it was just, we dug a hole and we saw that this, not literally, but this pipe is leaking. What are we gonna do? Well, we're gonna fix this pipe that's leaking, or needs to be rerouted. It was in a lot of cases, it was something like that. In other cases, it was something that was more like the asphalt, where it was deemed, this is an unsafe condition. Why we have people here, we can save a lot of money by, you will pay you will pay a certain amount by having these changes. Built into the contract is a 15% markup for the general contractor with these changes. That can stack if he uses a subcontractor. It maxes out at 27%, but most of ours were 20%. So there's a 20% markup for these, but considering that, we found many of these changes to still be at least necessary, if not also financial savings for the city. So we tried to anticipate sort of what is it that you want to know. So if we're making these changes, what is it that you guys are curious to know about? And so we had reviewed certain costs. We agreed upon costs. A carpenter is we will pay this much for a carpenter to do the work. So when the change order would come in at the end, say, okay, this carpenter spent 3 hours working on your project, we would verify, yes, indeed, we're paying $16 per hour as agreed for that carpenter, as opposed to $16.50 or whatever. And if you were to go through some of those pages, you'll see where it was marked off, no, this is an incorrect price. This is the correct price that we all agreed upon to pay for this particular labor. Daily, we had inspections where the engineering inspector would go through and verify, yes, indeed, that carpenter did spend 3 hours on that job, did not dilly-dally, and really, so we tried to verify equipment. What's the Blue Book rental price for this equipment? And we agreed upon that. So there was extensive, hence the 1,300 pages, there was an extensive investigation into each one of these to verify that we're getting what we paid for and not more. And then obviously the decision to actually go with these various changes went through a large decision-making process between the contractor, the engineer, and the owner, which is the city, just to verify, yes, that's something that's very important. Or no, we don't need that. This probably would have been 200 items long if we didn't go through there and just sort of open the checkbook, so to speak, and just said, get this work done. No, we actually did verify that these things are necessary. That final change order comes to 900. This, as was mentioned earlier, I apologize, this is still an incorrect amount. The actual change order amount is $400 difference, but it's $971,000 for this change order. But this is the important one, I believe. So we've just spent in total $20 million on this. What did we get for our money? So you can see we're required to remove, these are effluent, so effluent meaning what we're putting in the river. This is what we cleaned up. The phosphorus and the ammonia levels. And you can see on the left side of this graph was pretty clear what it is that we are, what we were putting out, and now what we're putting out now. It's just, the project, not only did we all work together very well, but most importantly, I think the city really got what it paid for. In other words, it was engineered wonderfully. It's installed just the way we intended it to, and is functioning as appropriate. And we're doing it at a rate that's, I mean, our wastewater rates are quite a bit lower than everybody else. So it's wonderful that we're honestly about 4 years ahead of schedule as far as our discharge permit goes. So that people told us, you know, originally it was the EPA and now it's the state. They say, you need to clean this stuff up and you've got until 2024 to get it done. We already have it done. So now we have the opportunity to kind of work on it. How do we want to change this and how do we want to tweak it? So I'm pretty excited to bring this forward to you. And we're all done. With that, I'll take any questions you may have about this.
Woody?
So I haven't heard dilly-dally in years, and thank you so much for that. So we've spent 20 million. Are we really done now, or is there going to be another phase? I mean, I know there's ongoing maintenance, but we've got the finest, cleanest water going in the river, right? What else do we still need to do?
I just really like being with you guys, so definitely we're going to have more phases. No, so we anticipate more phases later on. For example, like I mentioned, we've got the capability. We had some foresight and thought, you know, we've got these 5 different trains meaning just plain areas that can treat this. We've got these 5 trains that can treat 1 million gallons each. We cannot get anybody to work on our homes because there's so much building and construction going on here. We keep getting more and more people. We're going to need a 6th train. So when that time comes, when we hit that trigger, we'll say, this is not, 5 million gallons isn't enough. We're getting more flow into the wastewater treatment plant. Again, we had the foresight to, at one time, thank you very much, you agreed that we should build 6 of these trains. And so now when it comes time to increase the capacity to 6 million, it's only going to take $1 million. It's only going to take $1 million for the membranes and pumps and things like that. But we don't need to build onto that building anymore. We have the building in place. For example, and yeah, we will always be growing. So we can treat what we're treating right now fantastically, but I would imagine we're going to get bigger.
So just kind of clarify on that. Build out. We've always heard terms of build out. Do you have a number? How many flushes? How many people?
Our current build-out number is 85,000 people is what we're expecting the city, as a wastewater department. We're using Kootenai County's sort of growth model, and it's showing 85,000 for the city.
So that's where we are now or where we will eventually get?
Oh, in other words, what could we handle right now? So right now, we'll see what the census shows, but we're at, 55,000 people or something like that? And we are at 70% capacity. 85% is our trigger point.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Other questions for Mike?
That's good.
If there are no other questions, we'd be looking for council action.
Mr. Mayor, I'd move that we approve Resolution 19045, which is approving Change Order 2 to the agreement with Apollo Incorporated for construction of the Wastewater Tertiary Treatment Phase 2 improvements. Second.
Motion and a second. Further discussion? Kiki?
Just one comment. Mike and I did have some long conversations about this, and as you know, at committee level, I had a lot of questions which got answered. And my primary three views were to make sure that the way that we're approving these is legal and by statute and by contract, that we aren't rubber stamping $1 million worth of expenses without question, and that's kind of our job. My other questions for Mike, which he answered adequately, were that are we providing the proper oversight for these change orders or just checking the box that they're necessary to proceed? And so going through all of the details that he provided on how to make those decisions and who's involved, I felt comfortable that at the least case scenario, Mike's very aware that we're paying attention, and he and his staff are very aware of that. And I think that they're very accountable to that process. So I appreciate the input, the extra time, and the explanations. So thank you, Mike.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Any other questions for Mike? Roll call, please.
Eddinger?
Yep.
Evans?
Yes.
Miller?
Yes.
McEvers?
Yes.
Kukin?
Aye.
English?
Yes.
Motion carried. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Move on to resolution number 19-046, approval of a memorandum of understanding with the Fire Department Deputy Chiefs for the term of October 1, 2019 through September 30 of 2022. Troy.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Happy New Year. This is the first day of a new fiscal year. We're on budget, we're on target, so all is well the first day in. We spent a lot of time getting ready for this, and so I, myself, am very excited about October 1. I bring before you tonight a negotiated Deputy Fire Chief Memorandum of Understanding. This has been an ongoing memorandum since about 2006. This MOU would be applied to our 3 deputy fire chiefs. This commences October 1st today and would end September 30th, 2022. All prior resolutions would be done away with. In the negotiation, the major changes would be summed up with a 3-year MOU. The deputy fire chiefs would be level into the city's compensation program. That would be at a pay grade 18. That equates to a 3.95% overall increase, including the 2.5% COLA that was distributed throughout the other organizations, excluding police. We would increase the educational incentive pay to be equivalent with what we have in the other contracts, and we would propose to move their HRA VEBA, which is the Health Reimbursement Account, Voluntary Employee Benefit Account. That's paid by the employer. That's 100% vested when it goes to the employee, and the employee cannot match that. We would move that to $165 monthly. We would bring this for your approval, and I can answer any questions you may have.
Questions for Troy? Woody?
Troy, is this, with this increase, is it included in this year's budget?
Yes, we had anticipated approximately these details as we've been negotiating with this group.
Thank you.
You mentioned amount of, I think, 165 on the VEBA, so what is it currently that it went up to?
They were below what the rest of the staff was receiving. I think it was about $25 a month, but I would need to double check that.
But not a huge, okay,
No, and it's not any more than what we had been paying everybody else.
okay.
Any other questions for Troy? If no other, oh, go
Sorry,
ahead,
so
Kiki.
Troy, this is a 2-year agreement?
Three.
This one is a 3-year agreement, which would tie into the fire union's contract.
Okay, so it's the October, got it. I just wanted to make sure it was correlating directly with the contract dates, and I didn't see that correctly.
One more question, Mr.
Yeah.
Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Troy, does this mean that when the fire union contract comes up, that we will be negotiating this again, and it'll be part of that bundle?
We won't bundle it. It will be done separately, but you can see the correlation that would come out of the fire union negotiating, and then we would have this intermediary salary group called our deputy fire chiefs. The work that was done here puts them into our grade system.
Okay.
And that helps us keep the difference between the fire chief, the deputy fire chiefs, and then the rest of the folks that have a contract, the union.
Okay,
So
great, thank you.
We worked on that. That's the biggest area that was negotiated in here, was to try to get that leveled. That's why we bring that out as a highlight.
Good.
Any other questions? If no other questions, we'll be looking for council action.
I would make a motion to approve Resolution 19046, approving a memorandum of understanding with fire deputy chiefs for the term of October 1, 2019 through September 30th, 2022.
Second.
Motion in a couple of seconds. Any further discussion?
The MOU in the packet does say September 2021, so. Just,
Sorry about that.
okay,
Should be 3 years.
The actual contract says that.
okay.
Yeah, because it is, where was that, Kiki, that said 20?
I'm just looking at the memorandum of understanding that's attached in the packet.
But the date is 2022.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Roll call, please, Renata.
Evans,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes,
McEvers,
Yes,
Gookin,
Yes.
English,
Yes,
Eddinger.
Motion carried. Now we'll move on to resolution number 19047, approval of a memorandum of understanding with the police captains for the term of October 1, 2019 through September 30 of 2021. Troy?
So this would be for a 2-year contract. In the staff report, the last decision point mentions 1 year. That would be a mistake on our part. Last year, it was a 1-year contract with our captains. So the captains are a salaried position. They sit below the chief and the head of the police association that does a negotiation. So the lieutenants and below are all in the police association contract. So our work this year ties right back into getting the captains into a leveling in our existing system. So that would be bullet point number 2. The captains would be leveled at a compensation classification plan at pay grade 19. That would equate to a 5.84% overall increase for 2019-2020, including the 2.5% COLA. So this would be for a 2-year memorandum of understanding. And the point that came up in this negotiation would be some type of compensation for these salaried individuals that are called out at all hours of the evening, mornings, and other times, that it's difficult, it's not done for salaried people to be compensated. So what we said was, we will agree to provide you up to 50 hours per year pay to police captains approved by the chief. And this pay is some of the most inexpensive for the city because it would go into their health reimbursement account and their VEBA. So it's not dollars that go into their wages, it will go into that benefit. So the captains have agreed to have that. Again, it's a discretionary dollar amount based on call-outs overseen by the chief of police. So this would be the unusual part to this memorandum of understanding, again, for 2 years.
Questions for Troy? Amy?
So that VEBA contribution is in addition to the $133 per month?
Yes.
Okay.
Again, as long as it's being used. And there's, you know, different seasons and different call-out levels, and we put a maximum on that, as you can tell. So that was the agreed-upon approach to handle that call-out. Hopefully, this benefit doesn't get used.
Any other questions, Dan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Same question, Troy. Does this synchronize our captains with the association as far as contract negotiations and benefits?
Synchronized with the Police Association for contract negotiations, you are correct.
Okay.
And it gives us the room between the captains and the police chief and the lieutenants. So structurally, this is matching up.
Good. Dan?
So, and how many people do we have in these spots?
You have two captains.
Two, okay.
It's an easy negotiation to get them together.
So
Any
it's
other
not a
questions?
large group of impact, okay.
If there are no other questions, we'd be looking for council action.
So motion to approve Resolution 19047, which is approving a memorandum of understanding with police captains, both of them, for the term of October 1, 2019 through September 30, 2021.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Roll call, please, Renata.
Miller,
Yes.
McEvers,
Yes.
Gookin,
Yes.
English,
Yes?
Eddinger,
Yep.
Evans.
Yes.
Motion carried. Thank you, Troy. We will move on to resolution number 19048, rejection of bid for the public space for the Atlas Waterfront Project and authorization of staff to move forward with a negotiated contract. Bill Greenwood.
Good evening. I was hopeful that we'd have a different conversation this evening than the one I bring before you now. We met with contractors on Friday, the 13th of September. Not a good day. We had a lot of people show up, so we thought that we were going to have a lot of people come to the bid opening. We had one, Cameron Riley. Tommy Rivera was a couple minutes late, so he did not have an opportunity to submit. So before you today, we have an opportunity to continue this process moving forward, as illustrated in my staff report. I spoke with legal just before the meeting began, and as we move forward, depending on what your choice to do is, there might be a little change in how we have a decision point. So we can talk about how we want to move forward with this over-budget project, or at least this bid, over-budget bid.
Mike, could you add some language into that? Because we discussed that there's some additional things that you would like to cover with this resolution.
I think state statute allows us to reject all bids, city council to reject all bids when it comes in like it did in this case where it's over budgeted. It's over the budgeted amount that we had for this. We had one bidder that was timely and responsive, but it was in excess of our budgeted amount. So both the state statutes and the bid documents give council the right to reject all bids. State statute goes on to say in instances like that, based on a finding of fact by council, that this project can be done more economically by going out into the open market and negotiating for a contract, that you're allowed to do that. And so the finding of fact that I think is kind of contained in Bill's staff report is that there was a bid that, if it had been timely, would have been within our budget. And there's also the belief, based on talking to individual subcontractors or contractors in this very complicated and complex multidimensional project, that we could probably negotiate in the open market and come in, do what we want to do under budget. So in summary, the law allows you to reject the bids and then make a finding that of fact that it appears that we can go out and do a contract for these goods and services in a more economical manner by negotiating. And so any motion, I guess I would ask that you incorporate the facts in Mr. Greenwood's staff report as to the economical or the ability to go out on the open market and obtain the goods and services more economically. Was that long enough of an answer for you?
It was long enough. Woody?
I'm having a flashback. Has this happened at Memorial Field? The bids were too high.
Correct.
We rejected, and then we went out and found a contractor.
Well, we did a different thing like we did at City Hall, where we had a GMC.
CMGC.
and
CMGC.
CMG, thank you. And so that's what we did at City Hall, and that's what we have done at Memorial.
So is this the plan for this, if we reject
No,
this?
it's a little different animal, and so that's what Mike just described, your ability to reject by state statute, and then allow us to negotiate with contractors.
And that's different than what we did
Correct.
here in Memorial
A
Field?
little different.
Okay, help me.
Yep, Mayor Whitmer, there is one other alternative under statute. I don't think it's what we want to do, but we could reject all bids and rebid it. But I think, because, and Bill could speak more eloquently to that, I think time is of an essence to try and get the riverfront work done before, while the water level is down. And so I think it's, would be in the taxpayers' interest to go forward with trying to negotiate a contract with interested parties.
Dan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Bill, so Cameron Riley showed up, their bid was too expensive. Tila Riviere showed up late.
Yeah,
Their
like by a
bid could
minute
not
and
be
a half or
considered.
two, yes.
So when you, if we direct you to go out for a negotiated contract, you're going to talk to them both? Or how does that work?
I believe it would be prudent and only fair to talk to Cameron Riley first.
Okay.
Only because they were on time. If Cameron Riley is unwilling to negotiate, although I did receive a message from Jim Cameron that he's interested in working with us to bring the project on budget.
Excellent.
So that's, I believe, is the right thing to do first. If he was to say, you know what, guys, I really don't want to have any part of this, we would then step to the next contractor. And I'd like to try, if possible, this is your discretion, I think it would be better for the project that we used one contractor and that we didn't, we then become almost a general in this deal, and we don't really want to go there. We want to be able to negotiate with one contractor to do the entire piece.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? I know that Phil Boyd is here too. If we have any more questions, Phil's here to answer any questions that we may have of him as well. So Kiki.
I just had the one thing, Mike, that you said is for us to make a finding of fact according to the statute that the only bidder we had that was responsive was over our budget, but not necessarily can we throw it out if it's over the engineer's estimate. Or,
Well, I think
The bid documents say that you can reject all bids, and so in this case, there are a lot of add alternates, I believe, and so you could look at all of them and go, not based on the engineer's estimate necessarily, but the money you have. But you
Okay.
could reject it if it doesn't meet other qualifications too.
and then we did, so the finding of facts that we would need to find would be that there was an other estimate that was submitted, so it became ours for public record, even though it was non-responsive bid. We can use that as a finding of fact. We can also use input from other subcontractors' conversations.
Right, and so it would be the facts that Bill has given to you in the staff report and verbally, that there are other contractors that can do the work more economically if we go to them, and so that would be a fact.
Okay, and then in doing this, Bill, is your plan still to attempt to phase up the project as it is right now, getting late in the season, or are you still believing that negotiation will put the entire project online in time?
the negotiating would determine that, I would believe. So that Phil and I talked about some priorities that we would like to bring back to you if and when we can work out and hammer out a deal with an individual or a company and prioritize those. For example, what's been really near and dear to my heart is the ADA swim area and kayak launch. We could put the infrastructure in for the ramp that would get people into the water to swim, but maybe we don't put in the kayak launch. We put in the bulkhead for that kayak launch in the project, but it's another $75,000 or $80,000. That could be done later, or maybe there's a service group that's interested in funding something like that. And so it would still happen, it just might be a bit delayed. So those are the sorts of things that we're looking at in a way that we could have most of the project, all the nuts and bolts done, and then have other pieces. For example, the dog park has a couple of docks on either end of it. Maybe those docks don't get installed at the time. They were rather expensive. You know, maybe the fencing gets put in, the bullpen as you come in. That bullpen, for example, as well, seemed high to me. I don't know why it was so high. Seemed like it may have been over-engineered. I think there's a way we can cut that down and save some money on that dog park. So as I start diving into this more and looking at the numbers from the two contractors, I think there's a way we can get real darn close.
Were those amenities in the base bid, or were they adults?
Those were adults. Those are part of those 14 adults.
So in the base bid itself, you don't know about that part yet? That's going to be the negotiated piece with
Correct.
both of those contractors? Okay.
And then, Bill, that final negotiated contract comes back here.
Yes, and I think at that point, we would have that smorgasbord or that à la carte for you to look at and what we've determined with what funding we have and how we were able to whittle on the price sum. So we would present that to you at the time.
Okay. Any other questions for Bill? So, Mike, I had just jotted down, we have our motion here. I had just jotted down that something that additional that we may add here is that if this council chooses to make this motion, finding of fact that it is more economically prudent to directly negotiate with the open market. Is that sufficient language?
Yeah, I think if you look at the resolution, the next to the last paragraph says it, be it further resolved that the mayor and council hereby make a finding that the project can be performed more economically by negotiating with contractors to purchase the necessary goods and services on the open market based on the facts presented tonight about the La Riviere's lower bid and other facts.
So you'd like that included in the motion, or is it fine that the language is in the resolution?
I think it'd be good to include it in the motion. We're getting hyper-technical, but why not?
Okay, all right. So if there aren't any other questions, we would be looking for a motion.
I will take a stab at it.
There you go.
Forgive me, Renata. I would move that that the council finds that the project can be performed more economically by negotiating with contracts to purchase the necessary goods and services on the open market based on the facts presented tonight, that we reject the bid for the public space at the Atlas waterfront and authorize staff to move forward with a negotiated contract. Is that good? Thank you.
Second.
Well done.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Did you get that, Renata? Thank you.
If there isn't any further discussion, roll call, please.
McEvers?
Yes.
Gookin?
Yes.
English?
Yes.
Ettinger?
Yep.
Evans?
Yes.
Miller?
Yes.
Motion carried. Thank you, Bill. Then we'd be looking for a motion to go into executive session.
Mr. Mayor, motion to go into executive session under Idaho Code 74-206-1B to consider the evaluation, dismissal, or disciplining of, or to hear complaints or charges brought against a public officer, employee, staff member, or individual agent, or public school student. And F, to communicate with legal counsel for the public agency to discuss the legal ramifications of and legal options for pending litigation or controversies not yet being litigated but imminently likely to be litigated.
We have a
Second.
motion and a second. Any further discussion? Renata, is that a roll call or?
Yep.
Roll call, please.
Sorry. One more time. Gookin?
Yes.
English?
Yes.
Evans?
Yes.
Ettinger?
Yep.
Miller?
Yes.
McEvers?
Yes.
We are in executive session.